Okay, so I'm going to call the meeting to order. It is 6:06, and I am calling to order the meeting of the Racial Equity and Justice Task Force. We have present Karen, Douglas, Steve, Jason, Doug, Steve, Jason, Innie from our task force, and joining us from the public, Jamie, Kathy, and Ryan, taking beautiful and copious notes. So I'll start by asking, do I have a volunteer to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Okay, so I will say, let's do this together. If we can unmute ourselves and say together, I pledge allegiance. And I think we're supposed to technically stand out of respect. So either spiritually, metaphorically, or in the spirit of the pledge, stand as you will. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Beautiful. Okay, so any updates or comments from our board members, from our task force members? In no particular order, anything anyone wants to report, share, comment on? I'll just say that since we have gathered officially, it seems like although I don't know if it's official, it seems we may have a new president-elect since we last met, more than perhaps the last time, a little closer to that. And
it seems like it was weeks ago for some reason, but yeah.
a lifetime ago. Although I refer back to the original comments about March in dog years every day. And it'll be interesting to see what happens in terms of mandatory racial equity, diversity trainings and whatnot are required, because there have been some rollbacks on that. So it'll be an interesting, from the lens of the Racial Equity and Justice Task Force, I just think kind of worth watching and noting what we see and learn over the coming months and years. Any comments from members of the public? Okay, well, moving right along, we really wanted to spend a majority of today's meeting talking about the research plan and findings and action steps. This happily is a group that is a group of action doers, and Dan Iacovella is coming in now. So for the purposes of the notes, we'll welcome Dan. What I really like about focusing on this, and it seems like, between this week and next session, we do need to come up with a research plan that will inform the action steps that this group takes. And then finally, we will, after spending some time, and we'll see how much luck we have without Gina and without Alex here. We can advance this conversation, beginning some heavy lifting and reporting. And then Ryan was going to talk to us about some of her findings that she had been working on. So I had put that as, I think we're going to put that as part of item 6, Ryan, to hear and consider, just based on the email that we had sent back and forth. So, and then we also separately, I'm just going to ask you to send some dates, because we do need to come up with a calendar for 2021, and we have to submit that. So just look out for an email talking about your suggested dates. So with that, I'm going to turn this to you, Karen, and I'll just go one more time welcoming Dan. Any comments from the members of the public on updates, anything new, anything you want to share, anything that you heard about? This is our show and tell moment. Okay, so Karen, with that, I'll turn this to you.
So I have 2 documents that we're going to walk through. And I'm happy to share my screen. I just have to rearrange some things now. But what is the process? Just remind me, Nancy, for also getting that into the minutes. Like, is it to send that via email, or is it to put that in the chat right here, right now? Like, what's helpful while I'm working on sharing my screen?
I would defer to Ryan to see what she prefers.
Okay.
Is it something you're going to share? I mean, definitely put it on the screen, but is it something you're going to share out with the whole group anyway? Afterwards?
Yes.
Okay, I think that'll be fine. I'll be taking notes as you're talking, and I'll look at, reference the screen, but then I can look at the presentation later too, if I need to fill
All
in.
right. All right, I just have to give Zoom permission to see my screen, which is, I guess, I don't know why.
And
I have to, like, it's telling me I can't screen share right now until I've given it permission to record. my
Oh, I
screen.
think
So
I need to make you a co-host perhaps.
all I know is if I share my screen right now, it's going to quit me out of Zoom and then I have to get back in, which isn't a problem, but it might be.
All right, so what I'm
I
gonna
think
do
that's
is,
Karen, I think that's a security setting. And
Yeah, I know. And
it
what
allows
happened
Zoom to use
was-
your computer. You might have to reset it. Yeah.
I'm going to have to right. It's saying it will not be able to record your screen until you've quit Zoom and come back in, is what the message I'm getting in my security
What
settings.
what if I make you a co-host?
Let's try it.
All right, so let's see there.
All right, let me see if, let me quit out of that. Let me try screen share now. Will it let me? Now it seems to not care at all. So let me,
Oh, nice.
is that working? You guys
Yep.
can see the recommendations? Okay.
Yep.
So in terms of, so yeah, and then we'll start with this because what we have is we met a couple of times. We prepared kind of the plan as we visualized it. And that's what's in this deck. And the last page of this deck is sort of some action planning for who can take what action items. And then the other thing I have is kind of a part of this, which is to follow. I'll explain it as we go through. So let me first of all make this bigger so that you can see it bigger. You all don't need to see everything else on my desktop, but here's where we're at. I could have saved this at a
Under view, I believe, Karen, if you do full screen, that may help you. Like,
yeah, here, view.
Or start the slideshow.
Yep, slideshow.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure y'all can still, oh, that's presenter's view then you're getting, right? Or isn't it?
We do have presenters view. Yep.
Yeah, because it's going into my other monitor. Let me, I can, hold on, I'll just try swap displays. Let's try one more thing. How's that?
There you go.
perfect, beautiful.
Okay.
We got it.
Whew. Again, one of the thoughts that we had as we were doing this is, we may as a group want to come up with a look, a kind of a style guide for the communications that we put out, like what's our right look, colors, feel, so that we're consistent. So we were kind of putting together a template thinking if we're doing other documents that have a public facing at some point, we may want to think about that. So put that kind of in the notes is, do we want to have a consistent look and feel to the documents that might be public facing for our overall image? Anyway, that's just a sidebar. Okay, so the plan as we see it is basically that we want to start with some deep listening right away. By right away, we mean as soon as possible. So this kind of schedule reads left to right, if you will. The next page has specific dates and timelines, just so you know. But we saw this as we're going to do a couple different phases. We went back to the mission statement, and we know we want to do some qualitative work and we want to do some quantitative work, and we know we want to do a survey. Step one is really about informing the survey by having these kick off in-depth conversations with key town officials, as we discussed the last time we met. So these would be people, again, it's outlined in the action steps, but people like the chief of police, people like the superintendent of schools, people who have key roles of authority in town and opinion about what they might have heard from either their constituents or their customers or whoever they are sort of responsible for. So we want to talk to these people about some of their experiences. And the best way to do this pre-survey effort is kind of in these one-on-one in-depth interviews. So that starts community conversations, but on a personal level for kind of full disclosure. And what we're thinking with step one is any member of this task force can really take some of those interviews on. Hey, I'll call the chief of police. Hey, I'll call superintendent of schools, et cetera, et cetera. So again, that's to come, but that's what we see as step one, all
And
done before
so-
the end of the year.
And none of this is done in the public purview. It's all
These
kind of private.
Well, they can be recorded. They will be recorded. So whether we share that is probably up for discussion. The best way to have, from a research standpoint, the best way to have an open conversation in this way to get that authentic, honest, full disclosure kind of stuff is to have it sort of not shared with the public, but letting them know what the purpose is, which is guiding our next step efforts, which will be this townwide survey. And those results, I think, could be fully transparent once we get those. We could also share the findings from the qualitative, the deep listening, but we want to stay clear on our objectives, which is this kind of step one is really to help us inform what are the things we need to dig into with a quantitative survey in January. So again, that's sort of like, we want to have some conversations, then we want to build this survey instrument to send out in January. And that gives us sort of a baseline with where we're at right now. And then following that effort throughout the year, these are where those sort of listening groups could come into play, where we have groups of like-minded citizens or individuals, if you will, that we can identify in the survey. So say we do find, pulling something out, we do find serious housing issues, for instance, then maybe we want to have a bunch of people come together in a room to talk about the housing issues. So those are more like focus groups, traditional kind of group discussions. Pending our COVID situation come this spring, those might have to be online or they could be in person safely. Again, we'll have to see where we are, but everything else can be done via phone and online up until step 3, when we have a decision to make based on where we're at.
Does the timeline of, and I'm sorry if you want to get through all this and then I can ask questions.
Yeah, well, the timeline is on the next slide. So maybe I share the overview and then sort of share the timeline and then we do Q&A so that everybody gets the big picture first.
Perfect.
Step 4 would be, okay, so now we're heading towards the end of next year and we need to maybe see it, did anything change as a result of this survey? So, I mean, as a result of our work in the course of next year, whatever else is going into that before we leave that blueprint in January 2020, do we want to have kind of a second follow-up survey, 10 months later, to kind of gauge whether we had any progress so that we could fold into the blueprint.
January 2021, sorry.
Yeah, so we're this is really what will take us through the whole year. So let me advance to the timeline and how we saw it laying out. So starting here, bottom left, I probably have a pointer, but bottom left where it says, November 18th, literally that's tomorrow. Before we even get into the phone calls, one of the things that we were talking about, I think the last time, is could we get some sort of a press release drafted to let people know what our plan is, so there isn't that uncertainty while we're doing some work. We know people are anxious, so that's on the next page. We'll see if anybody wants to tackle that, but perhaps we send out a press release and then we begin these phone calls right away with key officials. The other note here on this is sort of secondary research, which really has already started. That's some of the other surveys. We've got to be able to gather those. We've got to be able to dig into town history. So that's all kind of under the guise of secondary research, not primary research. And the key difference there is, for those of you who don't know, primary research is research that we're going to do ourselves. Secondary research is research that exists or data that exists that we're going to mine for some other insights and nuggets. So that's why there's a secondary research kind of line item in there that can start immediately. It's actually already started, I'm sure. So then if that all can take place between November 18th and say, December towards the 21st is really when we would get into, okay, those phone calls all happened. We've now kind of looked at what we've learned and we have to start crafting questions and giving ourselves a month really to craft not only the survey questions there, but really start to move into execution of a kind of larger survey, however many people go in there. And that's what we had discussed happening in January. Now, some of the other action items on here where you see step 2, there's distribute the survey. And then we have some other line items. We have to start to think about the scheduling of the groups, and we have to train whoever it might be that would be facilitating those group discussions. I can certainly do it as a, kind of trained moderator and facilitator, but other people may want to do it as well. Maybe we don't want it to be somebody on the committee. Maybe we want it to be an objective outside party. We don't know. That's all TBD kind of things. But that should be going on concurrently. We close that survey out after a couple of weeks. So now we're into February, and we have to figure out how to look at those findings, right? And that's when real, some analysis of the data that's come in that we then want to maybe take a look at and fold those into our conversations that start then really in March. So March, we start to have these listening groups. Perhaps we learn something in the survey and we say, a huge percentage of individuals in our town feel X, Y, or Z. What do you think? And we start to have those conversations based on what we learned in the survey.
I just want to interject and say that Tamisha has joined us, and there's a caller. If you could identify yourself, 203-257-3820.
It's Patrina Cash.
Okay, Patrina, I will recognize your number. I will. So Patrina and Tamisha, welcome. Sorry, Karen is just going over the work that she did with Sonia and Alex about the recommended quantitative quality, the research plan. I can't say that word.
Research plan. So yeah, so then really those sorts of listening groups happen throughout the course of, the spring into the summer. And then we start to really take a look at what we've learned and starting to really take that learning to do the hardcore work of building out the blueprint at that point. And really that will kind of start to feed into another survey that, again, we can conduct by the end of the year, where we can say, hey, even just these conversations made a difference. Maybe we moved the needle in this past year just by having this committee and doing some work, but we want to set some goals for our blueprint. So say we moved the needle in one area, from 4 to 6, but now we really want to get from 6 to 10, and our blueprint will help us do that. So that's sort of why we were thinking that we want to do that follow-up survey, is to see if we moved the needle at all in the previous year. So again, this is what we thought, and when we brainstormed and pulled something together, nothing is set in stone. This is a good time for Q&A.
I'll just jump in and start, and I can see if you want to put in the chat box or just shout out if that doesn't work. Thank you so much for this. I just had a couple of questions that popped out. For the listening phone calls, do people just make the calls with no agenda except for how does that work?
So the next thing that I have to show you guys when we're done with this, I've already created a draft interview telephone guide, what's called an interview guide.
Perfect.
So I've mapped out on the first page is sort of some tips, qualitative research tips, listening tips, how to conduct that interview that we can walk through. I then have the guide itself, and then I also have a template for kind of capturing your information. Because if we jump ahead to some action items, you'll see on the next page.
Perfect.
If we have these interviews, and then we have, who's going to be making those phone calls.
Beautiful.
So I have over here on the right, all right, the guide is done, a template is done. We still think there should be a press release. That's, again, we keep thinking someone's got to communicate that we're starting the work.
I think that's great.
Somebody should probably oversee the whole darn thing, but at some point, and you'll see it here, it starts with synthesized findings from deep listening. Somebody's going to need to take everything that we heard and start to make sense of it. So that's why I figured if we had a template, that will be easier on that person's job. So that's all in there.
So my one overarching comment would be, and this is all beautiful, and provides us with even a blueprint of this next step, is that given the way, especially that there's Thanksgiving and COVID and emergency management, I would encourage us to look at 4 weeks as 6 weeks. And I hate to not do more, because I think time is not really on our side on this one. But I do think that realistically, if we're still committed to this twice a month, then that gives us a chance to be meeting, and maybe on the agenda, we can be thoughtful about how we, I just think that 4 weeks is very tight, given the way, to me, And
Sure.
maybe you guys want to march forward anyway. But I just want to put that out there that I've seen the way, at least, and this is not a government entity, so we shouldn't get bogged down in that. I just want to be realistic with like Thanksgiving in there and all the,
Well,
and
it
again,
probably depends on, what we figure is these phone calls are going to be about 20 minutes. We don't want to take up too much time. And
Okay.
we also don't want to, we want to keep them easy to do, thorough, and non-intimidating for the people that we're talking to. And so, these could really be just quick kind of 20 to 30 minutes at the most conversation.
Can you give an example of what would be in that? What kinds of questions?
Yeah, well, let me figure out how to share my other document. If I end this, let's just go there real quick and I'll share the guide as I've kind of put it together. Can you all see this Word document if I open it up?
Yep.
Okay, so what I put together was just some tips. If everybody on the committee does 1 or 2 interviews, it could be done it could be done quickly, quite quickly. So we can go over this another time if we want to, go over it tonight, we certainly can, but I have some tips here on the first page. So that's just, how to do those interviews. Recapping the objectives, we may want to look at these. Let me maybe make this a little bigger. We're really thinking that in these phone calls, we want to explore with the individuals their perceptions, their opinions, their experiences in this space of racial and ethnic inequality and injustices. We want to really see what they've experienced, or the opposite. Maybe they haven't experienced any of it. So we're trying to just kind of, skim the waters and see what exists out there from their points of view. We want to determine whether they currently feel supported in their efforts, or where they might need effort, because our blueprint is largely going to be supporting these individuals in the changes that they have to make, whether it's in the school system or the police department. So we want to see some of, where they foresee it being problematic and might need help, and then also get some of their suggestions for groups of people to survey, question areas, and then if they can think so far out as to the blueprint. So I have a quick kind of introduction here, straightforward. We're going to need to get their consent to record the call. We do have to make a note about whether it's going to be publicly shared. So Nancy, you maybe want to we really need to think about that and talk about that before we move forward. Answer any questions they have. And then icebreaker question, tell us a little bit about yourself. That's the first few minutes of any kind of interview, is really about just getting to know them, establishing some rapport, get them talking about a familiar subject, which is themselves, before we start saying, hey, let's talk racism, because we don't want them to be uncomfortable. And by that, I don't mean we don't want them to have the uncomfortable conversation. In the beginning of an interview, you want to make sure it's smooth and comfortable talking to you. That's that part of rapport. The types of questions that we talked about, and in a guide like this is never a specific script. It's more, use these questions. If you need to put things in your own language, you can, but you want to keep the questions very open-ended and inviting for them. Tell me about your experiences around racial or ethnic inequality and injustices in our town. How else have you experienced that in our town? How do you believe other people that either are, how do you believe, if it's the superintendent, how do you believe students would? How do you perceive faculty would? Whatever the, insert the people that they're responsible for, how would they answer that question? So you're just kind of throwing out questions that will invite conversation. What are concerns that people have brought to you in your position? Did anything happen with those concerns? What happened, if anything? What could have been done differently? What concerns do you think people have that haven't been brought to you? So again, these are just some conversation starting questions. The interviewer is not really participating. They're just chucking out the questions and listening, actively to what the answers are. And then again, kind of checking into where they feel that they've been supported, where they might need more support. And, that kind of a conversation, that can go 10 minutes, that could probably go longer. You just don't want it to go so long that, again, you've taken up a lot of their time, because right now, everybody's pressed for time. So, I think if this extends a little bit because you're having natural conversation, great. But a lot of this could be answered pretty quickly if they feel, that they're heard. And then just some kind of tick list questions, which are, in your opinion, who should we make sure we're including in our survey in January? What are some key areas we should be questioning about? Any other suggestions you have in our efforts to create a future blueprint? Anything else, and kind of wrap up. So that's, again, how we saw the flow of the interview. Fun and engaging conversations with people who are important to the conversation in our town.
And do you want it recorded and then we turn that over, synthesize
Well, that's, again,
notes?
all of that. Yeah, I mean, I think if I scroll to the next page, what I did was I kind of laid out a template so that if they have any questions before we start, we should just document any questions they have. That's just going to be good for us. Kind of could be another PR, if we start to hear everybody's wondering the same thing, well, we know we need a new press release, or everybody's wondering whatever. So we'll document some of the questions they might have, 3 things that seem to be relevant in their role. So this is what the interviewer would just collect your thoughts, right? No wrong answer on their part, but also, it's what struck you personally as the interviewer about their role that feels relevant. We'll highlight, what are their experiences in this space? Just capture some notes, limited amount of space so that we aren't trying to capture everything verbatim. That's not the point. The point of this is to really explore leading into, the survey, which will give us data. What concerns did they bring up? What concerns do they think are out there? This question here about concerns that they think people aren't bringing to their attention. This brings some real conscious information in there, right? It's what do you think people aren't talking about in this town? And then again, what would support look like for them? This helps us determine maybe some nuggets that we can start to roll into our blueprint. Things that we know in order for them to achieve, we need to make sure that this is set up. We help them set up a system for success. And then these last few questions really are just about our survey or the suggestions for the blueprint or anything else. So that's, again, that would be sort of the note-taking vehicle. It can be typed up as people are talking. The interviews can be recorded. I just don't know if we want to share those with the public, because that will be something we'd have to disclose up front. Or if we want to just say this is just used for our committee's research purposes only, if that's even an option, I don't know. Those are probably just questions we'd need to ask or really ponder.
I open it up to anyone from the group, really.
Karen?
Yeah.
I would suggest that we list the questions that we asked the interviewees instead of actually posting to the public, that interview. And that way they can get an understanding of, the types of questions that was asked, and these are the responses.
I'm also thinking that you might want to follow up a few days later just with an email. And now that you've had a few days to think about this, is there anything else you'd like to add?
Great idea. And I mean, maybe we don't have to record them. I guess that's another thing is, maybe we just say this won't be recorded if we want to, but I don't, Ryan, I see you shaking. That's it.
But I think that's a good idea, actually.
Yeah,
I'm shaking.
I agree with that as well, Ryan.
Yeah, I think it puts people on edge a little bit when things are recorded, and
100%.
also because of the way we're trying to capture the information in pretty broad strokes.
Yeah.
And to see where there are intersections, I think it may be not necessary. As long as people feel comfortable with their own note-taking ability.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I mean, I guess you could say, is it okay if I record this, just for my note-taking after I've made my notes, it'll be deleted or something like that.
Yeah, I just don't know what's allowed. That's back in the what's allowed. Are we?
Yeah,
Right.
That's a good point. I mean, I think, Nancy, you would need to check with the lawyer, the town lawyer, right? I think they're very stringent guidelines.
Yeah.
as to what we can record and who we can share it with.
The
I
one,
think if they can have, as long as we say up front, we're recording this. I don't know. I mean, yes, I think it's important to ask, and I will ask that question, but I think if you are going,
if we could get away with not recording it, we'll have more honest and, honest sharing. That's a fact, right? People will say, we'll be like, well, since this isn't necessarily on the record, they'll just share more candidly. But, if we have to, then we have to disclose it. So.
How do you deal with the idea that different people hear things differently? If you're not recording it and you're just taking notes, I might be taking notes about something one person's saying and somebody else might hear it very differently. So I'm just curious, when you do this kind of research, how do you?
So because it's qualitative, kind of by definition, qualitative research is largely contingent upon the interviewer's relationship with the person they're interviewing. It's a one-on-one in depth, and that's the relationship. So the conversation will be affected by that, who's doing the interviewing and what their perceptions are.
Yeah.
But it's not, because it's not quantitative, it's not necessarily projectable, it's not statistical, and its objective, again, is to kind of inform. So that's not problematic. It is what it is. We're using this research. If I scroll back up here to kind of what we're doing, we're here to explore. We're here to kind of determine what we can from them in terms of their experience and their level of support, but also we're trying to inform our survey and some of our other questions that will be in the listening groups taking place next year. So it's an initial step just to get our feet wet while we're ready to proceed.
I have a follow-up question to Kathy's question.
Yeah.
Is there a particular method that we can all even if it's just a little bit to read about, that we can kind of at least look for the same, we want to appear to be the same, right? Asking the same question and get the answer. So if there's any kind of method or, that's what I was kind of looking for specifically. So that.
But I think that script does this, no?
Yeah, I mean,
is this script somebody's or is it yours?
No, I wrote this. I wrote this week, so this is ours.
But there are processes for analyzing the raw qualitative data to distill out the themes that we'd want to then build into the survey, right? That's not just a willy-nilly sort of thing, right?
I'd love to jump in here because so when Gina and I, and by way of just being a bit of a team cheerleader here, we clearly are not a group of scientists with this expertise and background. We are a group of concerned citizens who, through best efforts and interest and intent, because I think intention matters here, and that's why you're all here. I think that, in my mind, pairing up a task force member with a committed member of the community, maybe we can pair up by complementary skill sets. I'm a talker, so maybe I go in with someone who's less of a talker, but who wants to take notes. And it doesn't have to be 2 task force members. It can be a task force member and Kathy as by example, or Ryan. And then we're relying on each other for the point of view and perspective that we bring to the table, so that this is not science-based. And Karen, correct me if you think I'm not on the right track here.
Yeah.
I think we have to be confident in our own ability and what we bring to the table, which is not necessarily the science skill set, but rather intuition and good listening skills, good conversation skills, again, good intention, trying to pull out information from people. So I think the blueprint that Karen provides by way of a script, by some model questions, that's the uniformity. I think where the skill will be really required, as Doug, you just started to talk about, is how that information is then taken and distilled into a bigger pot where we can then go on to inform the survey. So I think in the phase that we're being asked collectively to start with the phone calls, I'm less concerned about the actual skill personally. Right. I think the specific skills matter less than just the doing of it.
Right. This is basically, these are 10, maybe 10 phone calls, right? These are phone calls with individuals where you're really just kicking off a conversation that you are not necessarily participating in with your own thoughts and experiences and opinions, but listening more for. Your role in the conversation is the question asker and the listener. But being yourself, like, here's kind of going back to that point. Whenever I've trained interviewers who are not as proficient as somebody else, it's always like, the most important thing is be yourself. Tell them, I'm not a professional interviewer, but I have the honor and privilege of interviewing you today, so thank you for your time. If you are positive, if you are upbeat in the conversation, I'm so looking forward to this conversation, and you project out some energy in your greeting, they'll match that. That's what people do in these kind of situations. You stay away from things like, I agree, because you're not there to agree. Stay away from things like, I've had the same experience, because you're not there to share your experiences. So that's where it's like, be interested and maintain your neutrality. That's what matters the most, is you want to hear. None of us are the chief of police, right? None of us are the superintendent of schools. So we have not worn those hats. So our goal is empathy for the hats they're wearing. And then, the only real advice is stay away from the yes or no questions. Stay away from things that would be like, if I scroll down to, and that's what's sort of here, if you ask these closed-ended questions, you won't have a conversation. So if you go to the questions themselves again, let me just scroll for you. Sorry about that. Talk to me about your experiences. That's very different from me saying, have you experienced any racial or ethnic inequalities in town? That's a yes or no answer. You won't have a conversation if you say, have you experienced this? But if you say, tell me about your experiences, that opens up the door to a conversation.
And also not to panic, because the fact is, if you ask something in a yes or no way,
absolutely,
the out is, okay, yes, tell me about that. Was there a time, and I know that every one of you here is capable, because Gina and I spoke to you on the phone, and that's precisely, it was both a give and take in that experience. So maybe some of this, Karen, will be informed. And again, not to cut off any questions that remain, but if we really assign, start assigning and pairing people, that maybe some of this will kind of naturally inform it. And how many conversations are there?
So right now, what we did was, again, this was largely based on, I'm sorry, it's hard to have my screen big enough. And anyway, so this is
go into on your screen where it says view, not on the very top, not under PowerPoint, but on the screen, like where the, there. Nope. And maybe if you say full screen, that it may help you there, right there. Nope.
Under this, well, that's stop share, your screen sharing.
You can also reduce the magnification in the lower right corner.
Yeah, why don't I just do that? That's something I can easily do. Thank you.
So many cooks. See, none of us have a problem. We're all perfect.
I like that. So this list started from our committee work, right, where we started to talk about the people, and then we just started to build it out a little bit. So it's not a complete list, but we know we want to talk to the chief of police, or at least we think we do. Maybe is there somebody else that's a more appropriate police person to talk about? That's up for discussion. And then, community and economic development, that, is kind of about small businesses in town, or businesses in town in general. Voices for Equity, we think her name was Sophie. We don't remember, but we
Sophie Mughal.
Yeah, I should type that in. The Interfaith Council, we were thinking. I don't know. I know that I forget who it was on one of our calls, but I think that from a faith-based, we should maybe bring that into this.
And I actually want to check in and say that some of these actually may be a few tiered. So maybe like Interfaith Council could actually be faith-based organizations, and we do like Connect, and we go to the Episcopal Church, and so it's actually a few conversations. I would say the police department is actually probably Chris Liddy, and maybe somebody lower level to give a broader depth. Voices for Equity, it's not just the ward group, that's called Voices for Equity. So maybe it's talking to a couple of them. Maybe there's someone who's in charge of other, which is like Fairfield Yabantu and kind of,
Yeah,
Go-
and that's sort of where we were with this. If we kind of go all the way down to the bottom, you know, we went to the schools, the housing, the health department, human and social services, human resources. That's kind of where we were like, those seemed key. And then we were like, but there's others and we don't know
Yeah.
what that is. We don't, you know, we were like, I don't know, what are the others?
yeah. So, do you guys want to, first of all, I would just want to stop and pause and say, does anyone have questions, further questions at this point? And I can't see everybody because of the screen share. So if you do, just, shout out.
My one thing that jumps to mind first, and maybe this can be addressed just in the way that the press release comes out, in that it doesn't look like, oh, we're just going back and talking, we're not talking to people, it's got to be made kind of clear that it's not another repeat of like, oh, all the town leaders are now saying what they think or whatever. I don't know.
I think we refer back to our mission and we incorporate our mission statement, which is to deliver a blueprint. And It's a great point, Ryan. And maybe in the interest of moving this forward, is anyone interested, a group of people, 1, 2, 3 people interested in writing a press release? I'm happy to be on that team. No one? All right, maybe
I can help with that too.
I can help with that.
Tell me by name because I can't.
Okay. Any?
Ryan? Am I missing anyone else? So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take, so Karen, if you want to assign, I'll take on as point. And then with Gina's help and Innie and Ryan, I will kind of broadly draft. I'll take our mission statement, I'll take this plan and I'll come up with something and, we'll share it, but then we can go from there. Okay.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
So project manager.
So yeah, so what we were thinking is somebody who's got really good project management chops. It would be really great if there was like a taskmaster for our committee, like basically somebody to keep like, if we have to adjust the timeline by 6 weeks, we can do that or whatever, but somebody who's going to be like, hey folks, and I don't know if anybody on our committee has really great project management skills, but it would be great if we had an overseer for all of those things. Otherwise, we might, you're in danger of missing deadlines and all that stuff. So I don't know who has that, if anybody.
It's very much my wheelhouse, and I'm wondering if Gina and I, in our role as task force co-chairs, like that's
Yep.
But I would really want to defer to the group to see if there's someone that is more interested and also feels like that skill set is in their wheelhouse, because no one, that is crickets.
I am confident that it is not in my wheelhouse. So I'm happy to.
No, I want someone to feel strongly that this is something they're really good at, because I think it is a specific skill set.
Yeah.
And it's kind of in some ways to keep the rails on the train, or the train on the rails, or whatever. Is that really no one? No one?
Maybe it's no one that's on this call tonight. Maybe there was maybe the no-shows.
All right, for now, assign me and Gina.
Yep. Okay.
In our role as task force, and I'm willing to take on the press release just because it's language that we had to work through with the mission statement.
Yeah.
But again, we want this to be a group
Absolutely.
effort.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So remember, we talked about in the kind of plan, secondary research has started, can be going on. It's like, what's in our town history? We talked about talking to the historical department, or somebody might need to look into, town ordinances. What's our history in our town with, kind of any laws that were in place? Like, let's go back and do the work. What about those other survey results? Anything important out of there? So somebody has to take on the task of owning the secondary research effort. And that's great for somebody who's like, hey, I'm not going to be a primary researcher. I'm not going to be on the phone with people. I'm not going to be, doing those group discussions, but I can sure dig into research that exists. You just have to call and ask for it, or
And
I don't know who that might be.
yeah, we had started that, Annie, I believe you had, am I wrong in saying, like, some people had already sort of said they were interested in that, but
Yeah,
assigning it in a very formal way. I think this team, you know, if this is a team of 3, 4,
yeah,
with someone spearheading it specifically, I think that would be, you know, 2, 3, but someone kind of taking ownership of being the clearinghouse for all of this. And Ryan, I know you've dug into some of this, but I would love to, is there a task force member official who wants to take ownership of this piece?
I'll jump into this one, the secondary research.
And I'll do the history part, and Jason, you know, the town history. I don't know, are we dividing these up?
So what I would like to do here is Jason is going to be point, and I don't think we need to list any here. Like, let's list the point people.
Yep.
And then whoever just for clarity. And
Yep.
then Jason, it will be up to you, Annie and Jason, if you could have a sidebar conversation, but Jason, it'll be up to you to make sure that your team is getting you what you need, but we will call on you when the time is right. So if anyone else wants to join Annie and Jason in this endeavor.
I can help with that. A
that was
piece of it.
Kathy, right?
Yeah, Kathy, sorry. Yep.
No, that's good. Kathy.
So in some ways, while Gina and I are sort of broadly speaking the taskmasters,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, not a good use of that phrase. While we are the people that keep the wheels on broadly, Jason, you're like the subcontractor of this one. So the idea being that with all of these subheadings, you know, we would go to you, Jason, and for the next one, we would go to the point on that. So if that makes sense.
Okay,
Right? Is that
that makes sense.
a vision that makes sense with everyone?
Yeah. And I mean, there may be other, you know, it's when you guys meet, Jason and Annie and Kathy, for instance, you may say, all right, so, you know, Alex and Sonia and Karen kind of threw these out there, but we really need this information, and I know it exists somewhere. Somebody, you know, so, you know, own it, run with it, see what else we need to know.
Exactly. I mean, and that is the key thing, what you've just said, Karen, is we as both members of the public or individuals and task force members have to feel empowered that if we don't have access to something or a point hasn't been made, we have to feel empowered individually to run with that. You know, you don't really need permission.
Right.
So just do. I mean, we need permission in the sense of the efforts need to be organized and coordinated, but not because you need a yes or no. We just need to make sure, oh, that's not being done in this direction.
Right. So another line item that has to really happen prior to doing a survey in January is, how are we going to do that survey in January? So it's more than just, you know, creating the questions and drafting the survey instrument, but it's how will we execute the survey? How, you know, what is this going to be a DIY thing using SurveyMonkey? Are we going to try to work with an organization? I know that Alex was talking about Qualtrics. I forget who else they mentioned. I don't do survey research. That's not my wheelhouse. So I don't really have the, you know, I don't really know, but somebody has to figure out the logistics of running the survey. How do we get it out to people and all that? Doug, did you just raise your hand?
Yeah, so I've had some experience with that. So why don't I would love to have a partner, but yeah, happy to do that.
Someone's going to work with Doug on that, right?
Well, did Alex say she had a background in that? So why don't,
Well, it could be Alex or Sonia, but I hate speaking on their behalf because
I'll follow up with both of them then and see.
I'll write down the maybe.
I like it.
Yeah.
Optimism.
Yeah.
You sort of, it's manifesting.
Yes, exactly. So now, so after we'll come back to the conversations because this is helpful, but after those conversations happen and we all have notes, it's often one person who kind of can look at all of the notes or even just, facilitate the conversation of, so what does all of that mean? And looking at the notes and saying, what does this all mean? How does this factor in? So does somebody want to kind of synthesize all of those findings from what we've heard, or
is that an area where you, Alex, and Sonia have expertise?
Well, I certainly do. So I'm happy to do this, but if somebody else wants to, if somebody else is like, I'd love to do that, then by all means speak.
I'd love to help out with that.
That's you, Doug? Yeah, all right. So,
well, let's not give Doug two job
I will,
titles.
I will lead the first one. I will help out with the second one. If that's
all right, I will lead this one, and I'm going to say with Doug, and we will ask Sonia and Alex if they want to be involved, and Ryan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Doug, it's not to say you don't have the capability. I just am trying to spread the love here.
I did not hear it that way. So.
Okay, thank you. Safe space.
Yeah, right.
All right. So then we get back to the survey itself. So now imagine Doug's done all this research and he knows how we're going to do it. And we've also taken a look at the findings from the listening, so we sort of know what's important, but somebody literally has to draft the questions. And I don't know if somebody has a passion for that, kind of what do we need to be asking, thousands of people in our town.
We can also, for some of these, put TBD.
Yeah, we could TBD this one.
Because this research, and have an opportunity for Gina and Sonia and Alex to be here. And I'm saying that we figure somewhat out.
Yep.
Because again, we have to just to remind everybody of what we need to accomplish today is, I think it's important that we fill in this table, and so that we can. What's that?
No, I'm going to stop my video. I'm just wondering, everything what you were just saying got broken up there. Was everybody else hearing it properly? Maybe it's me.
No, it's not just you, Karen. Okay.
All right. I was wondering, my wind is gusting up all of a sudden out my window behind me, and I'm like, are we having another one of those? Anyway. All right. So those are the kind of to-dos. That's as far as we got with them. Not that there won't be other to-dos, but I thought between now and the next time we meet, maybe the other to-dos pop up, but this is sort of the immediate, we know we need to start doing these things. So that's why there's a couple of question marks here. It's like, are there other things that we need to be doing right now? Or is it really just, we're ready to start the interviewing and some of these action items? Did we lose Nancy?
Sounds like it. Yeah.
Like she's literally gone.
Green's still there, yeah.
Yeah, looks like it.
Yeah.
Are there sort of preparatory things we'd be doing for the subsequent steps now, like designing the listening group structure? Or
well, that's all. If we kind of come back to, oh wait, where was it? If I come back to the previous slide, can we go to the previous slide? Can I go to the previous slide? Where are my other slides, folks? Hold on. That's
Doug, in terms of the answer to your question, Karen has those scripts. So in some ways the calls could start tomorrow.
Oh yeah, I think
I was actually thinking about the smaller groups later on, just
later on
how we're going to design process.
Yeah, I would think in terms of kind of our efforts, we really don't have to start doing that till January. Like here we have kind of trained facilitators, schedule the groups. So that can be a concurrent effort in January. I think we'll meet again before we get to that. So what I was thinking again is there are certainly other action items that will carry us through. But I feel like the important thing is to look at what are the action items that we have to meet, that we should get started on before the next time we meet. And then the next time we meet, we can say, what new action items are we adding? You know, so, because I think that we're always going to have a what's next on our to-do list.
One thing that comes to mind is to make sure that the list of people that are being interviewed, maybe go back. I just was flipping back through some of the minutes this afternoon and noticing, I think it was in the first or second meeting, that there were quite a few like kind of groups or efforts that had been noted in the minutes that got discussed, and maybe take a look at those and see if any of those would be appropriate for, you know, as somebody to talk to.
So maybe
those conversations are always like I've been finding, even the couple, you know, the little couple of research things that I've done, I feel like it's a good way to connect and to get people to begin to get people to be engaged with your work also, you know, besides what they're giving you information, but just like an outreach and a more, even if it's informal, you know, to different groups and saying, yeah, we're working on this. So, and maybe some of those groups fall under the secondary research or whatever, but just maybe, I guess what I'm thinking of is just making sure that if we've done kind of a brain dump of what the different groups are, to just in some kind of organized way, and maybe that's the project manager, you know, to make sure that we're hitting all of those either through secondary contact or the initial the initial outreach.
Yeah.
I know someone said this earlier, so I apologize, but
No, that's fine.
if there's any way, it seems to me if there's any way for us to have not just the initial 20-minute or 30-minute chat with these people, but to somehow follow up and ask, is there anything I missed, 4, 5, 7 days later?
Yeah.
I think people, if multiple contacts will get you better information than a single contact.
Yeah.
I just know that's a much bigger workload if we aim for that.
Yeah, so I'm just bouncing back just to the timeline here. We want to bring the phone calls and we want to follow up with emails. I think that's a great added line for what we're doing. Because I think that would be sweet. So anyway, so I have it here just to make sure that it's captured in our timeline somehow, but that would probably be up to the individual person who's taking this to do that, right? And then Nancy and Gina keeping us accountable in their role as project managers, like, hey, did you guys have that interview? Did you send that follow-up email?
And Ryan, to your point, I looked back also just now, and there are, a lot of groups that it may be even to add, on your yellow sheet here, Karen, where it says, the question mark.
Yeah.
So I think maybe we could, again, I bring up the idea of some of these being multifactorial.
Yeah.
Like superintendent of schools, but maybe you also want to talk to the Board of Ed. They have the survey they did, now it was 2016, the racial imbalance survey that's on the website, or 2015. But like, as I said, chief of police, but wouldn't it also be interesting to talk to a lower level police officer to get a broader sense of what's happening in the department, at least very broadly. Interfaith, as I said, I think there are a lot of groups working. So I would just, make sure, like the political groups, the RTC and the DTCs, that's something that, in thinking about who runs for office, the fact that the only woman of color or person of color who serves in an elected position, what is there a feeling there? And, again, I just think about, Wakeman Boys and Girls Club. Some of the youth groups.
And certainly we could blow the list out and ask everybody.
Right, and I'm just saying, for instance, because we talked about arts and culture.
We talked about mental health. We talked about housing. Electeds. We talked about the social services. You have Parks and Rec in terms of youth engagement. So I saw Wakeman, but you know.
Yeah. So again, we can do all of that now, but that list can get pretty long. We started off limited because, you know, we'll start to get the big themes. We're going to get a lot of information in our survey, and you know, and then we'll be able to have those conversations this spring. But are those groups, are those factions large enough that they should inform our survey design? That's really what it comes down to is or did we capture the big buckets with these other people? And again, thinking about the objectives of these interviews is really largely to start to get our teeth into things and create the right survey.
The only thing I would say is some of this is too specific. Like, for instance, the Voices of Equity, I think it has to be more broad in terms of the student, youth, racial equity groups. So maybe it's like one conversation, but it's with 3 people, you know, so I don't know the best way about that. And maybe whoever is assigned to that, you know, that can be a sidebar conversation. I would say, and so maybe now we don't talk to Parks and Rec because we're covered with those kind of self-selecting kids who might know. But I would say that politics for sure is something to me that feels, it informs so much of what happens in town that it would be important to, and I think the town will want to have, I just think that's an important metric to talk to both two-party system here in town is mostly what exists. So I'd want to understand, you know, broadly, and I think that would be important. So
the question is, that's something that you don't have that insight in your role on the board of, you know.
I would want someone more objective.
Okay.
Nancy?
Because I have a specific point of view and I would like to hear it from someone who's not involved in this work. As a Democrat, I know what the Democratic position might be, but I would like to, in fairness, because the 2 co-chairs are Democrats, the makeup of this group is balanced, but I would want the opportunity for the Republican Party to have a conversation.
So is that the RTM, which is collective?
It would be the RTC specifically. Or maybe it is the RTM and it's the minority leader, the majority leader, but I think it's actually the body of people who seek out the people to run for office. So I actually think it's the RTC, the Republican Town Committee and the Democratic Town Committee.
Yep. Okay. I'm gonna have to just so y'all know, I'm gonna have to. These are probably going to be on 2 separate slides.
Nancy, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I know someone who's on the Republican side. He didn't get. I was running against him. What's his first name? Jason. And we had a brief conversation during election night, and he's up for it. And he's Asian. And he has faced racism within our town. Like he says, I face it every day. And he's willing to speak to this committee.
Great.
Yep.
So that would be, and maybe Tamisha, if you want to be, you know, sign up for that. But I do think that is an important piece. Thank you for that input.
I'll reach out to Jason.
So Karen, do you want to add Tamisha to that line? Town political system.
Town political system.
Yep.
That's great. Thank you. Does anybody else have passion for these conversations? Any of them in particular? You'll see what I have here is this TBD, which is, I guess, political groups come out of there. But, you know, I also have a kind of a line item on the right about who's going to kind of, you know,
decide what that looks like.
So,
right.
So this
so
one really comes up.
We can fill in that blank on the bottom left.
Yeah.
After the next meeting. So we can fill in the bottom right, the orange, with someone who is interested in that.
Right. All right. So I've got TBDs there. All right. So does anybody else have passion for any of these other and other groups?
Are we, are you gonna like kind of fill it out more? Like at this point, I mean, we kind of talked about filling it out, but I only see like another, like one thing, the political. And I,
Well, that's what we're just saying. Just to go back, there is a line on the orange grid which says research what other groups to flesh out. So if someone has a vested interest in thinking about that, we're going to come back and fill in more of those groups next time. So today's focus, what we have to do left is to decide who wants to determine what those groups should be. But then we have to assign people for conversations, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 conversations that we know of for sure. And I think 10, if you include someone to pair up with Tamisha on the political side.
Can I suggest that we actually ask in our script in these conversations who else we should talk to? It's sort of buried in there now, but let's make that more explicit. Like, who else do they think we should talk to?
And what you mean, Doug, is kind of one-on-one at this phase.
Yes,
and that's maybe where we can get at. I see your comment here about, some people that aren't quite as high up in the system, but are a little low, but
I actually think we should try to deliberately say we're going to, like, if we talk to the head of the director of human and social services, that we try to identify someone who's like front lines and interview them as well.
And this goes into the idea of being empowered, that when you're in the middle of that conversation, you should feel empowered to do that and then go ahead and have that conversation, and then we can report back retroactively. And the only thing sorry, Karen, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, so if it's that, if you take on the human and social services director and you're talking to Julie, and then she says, you really need to talk to the woman who runs Operation Hope, then say, great, I'll do that, because that's the space you're owning as the committee member that owns
correct
and social services.
But first, you are checking in with me and Gina and saying, hey, I just had this great conversation, even if it's a text message or an email, just so we can coordinate efforts, because exactly, two different people might have said, deferred you to, I'm making this up, to Operation Hope. So we don't want 3 people having that conversation.
Right.
Again, of moving this forward, chief of police, let's start down the list. Who is interested? And it can be 1 or 2 people. In fact, in some instances, I think it should be 2. Who's interested in calling?
Conversation though, if 2 people get on the phone with him, that sets it up for a totally different dynamic. It's okay. It's an imbalance.
Yeah, fair.
One person.
So chief of police.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So just in line with what people have been saying, I think, it's good to talk to the heads of these departments, but what we really want is the people in these areas who have the most historical perspective on the issue. And that may or may not be the heads of these departments. It may be someone who retired recently. I don't know how current or how long these people have been in these roles.
Yeah.
So I think that's what we want to get to, is who is the people who's the person or persons in this area who's been around, not necessarily the longest, but who would have the best perspective in this area.
And maybe that actually goes back to, the first question is, we're calling you because you're in this role of director, but maybe you're not the appropriate person to talk to. And it might take you a phone call or 2 to get to the right person, but we've got to start somewhere, right? So,
it's important to talk to them as the leaders, but again, they're going to come at it with their vision as, leading this agency or organization.
Right,
And maybe they're only doing it for 2 years, I don't know. And someone just retired who was doing it for 15, so.
And great point. And so to that, we trust yourself to give yourself the permission to just, in fact, make that call and just check in with me and Gina. So to that end, I know, Steve, you're very interested in the police issue. Is this a call you're interested in making?
Yes, I'd like to, and that could be our blueprint. Could be we talk to these 2 people in the police department, and the next step would be to talk to these 3 other people.
Yeah, great. Community and economic development. I mean, Sonia has a real interest as a small business owner, so I want to reserve the right to ask her. Karen, in making up this sheet and being the owner of it, and then if you could deliver it to Ryan, but can you first check in with Sonia on this
Yep.
one?
Will do.
And on the other areas on the right where the research survey platform options,
Yep.
and see if,
I'll do that. I'll reach out to them tomorrow and then,
perfect, okay. Youth groups, the Voices for Equity. Maybe Gina is interested in that because of her student involvement
yeah, she certainly has a lot of insight into that, right?
and has insight. So the Interfaith Council, interfaith groups, and happy to kind of brainstorm offline what that means, but anyone interested in that? I know that's an area of interest for you. Is that a conversation you'd want to lead? Is there
She's on-
anyone?
You're on mute. I'm sorry, Annie, you're on mute.
Sorry. I don't know if I want to lead that, but I can certainly be on that. But I'm not sure what it entails, but definitely.
So in terms of making an initial phone call, so if you're not,
Yeah, I can do that.
okay, so let's talk, if you could follow up with me, Annie, I'm putting
Sure.
this in your hands to follow up with me so we can, if anyone has thoughts, reach out to Annie separately, but I have some places where you might start. Two people in particular, Evan Schultz from B'nai Israel. He's part of Connect, but also, and Gina will remember the woman who is a pastor at the Episcopal Church. I think it's Episcopal Church. Why am I not remembering her name? Circle back. I'm having an aphasia. Superintendent. Anyone interested in that conversation? I think he'd be happy to talk about anything other than the reopening of schools. So
I'm more than happy to have to do the education ones as
Great.
I have, all these
great.
people in the school system, but I
Karen,
wouldn't-
you're up. Type your own little name, right? Your big name right there.
Got it.
Housing Authority. Anyone. Health Department.
Doug's hand went up for health department. That would be really interesting. They would also be really happy to talk to somebody about anything not COVID.
Exactly. Human and Social Services, Julie DeMarco is awesome.
Oh, Steve just raised his hand.
Steve to call Julie, great.
Yeah.
The Human Resources Director is brand spanking new as a few months ago.
I feel like Alex, is Alex?
So that's what I was going to say. Alex is in HR. I would love you to follow up and see if she'd be interested in that call.
I will. Yeah, I'll reach out to them. And I see that chat, Tamisha. Tamisha just said, "Oh, I'll do the housing department."
Perfect.
So,
Great. And that may be a question too. Some of this falls under the purview of Mark Barnhart.
Yeah.
So Tamisha and Sonia's not here, but it's worth connecting to kind of coordinate. Because
they work in.
Yeah, and I would also, Tamisha, under Housing Authority, let's talk about if that is who the right person would be.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm gonna just on Steve. I just feel like I need to have the word Operation Hope in there with Human and Social Services Director. It just feels like, Operation Hope is such an entity in our town. I don't know if there's any issues with homelessness and blah, blah, blah. Okay.
Right. Is anyone interested in taking on this idea of looking back at the other areas, the other constituencies, and coming back to the group next time to say, I think we're really missing this piece?
We can also leave that until we regroup, because we may,
it may reveal itself.
Yep. We may uncover that.
Yeah.
Right. That may come up like, hey, you guys really need to be talking to X, Y, Z. So
okay.
I would be comfortable moving forward with some TPD, but
do you want only task force members to do the interviews? Or do you want support doing that?
I don't see why it couldn't be assigned to somebody outside the official task force.
I can, okay, because I could do arts and culture if you wanted to interview somebody there.
I wouldn't mind asking, we talked about Michael, and I don't know what's happened with that, but I think that would be an interesting one from the History Museum, just because they have a rich history of programming. So I do think, Karen, if we could add that specifically, maybe making a new column or a new
row. Yep.
New row.
Please hold.
Yes.
I'm sorry, Nancy, are you talking about the Fairfield Museum or a different museum?
The Fairfield History Museum.
Okay, because I've been going back and forth with Walt.
Yeah.
Mattis on that.
Okay, so
Me and-
arts and
me and-
culture, maybe it's the warehouse. So maybe Ryan and Doug, is that who's speaking? Sorry.
Yeah.
Me and Innie are going to be doing.
Oh,
That was Dan, wasn't it? Was that
Yeah.
Doug?
Yes, Dan.
Dan,
oh,
not
sorry,
Doug.
sorry, sorry.
Dan and Innie.
Are working the historical perspective.
Right.
All right.
I'm
And
saying
we're
for-
also going to be talking with Jason about.
Ryan was mentioning arts
Right.
and culture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's a good case of where, some of the secondary runs over into the,
Yeah.
whatever.
Yep. So again, maybe we leave that one for now, since we've got and we circle back and see what reveals itself, Ryan.
Okay, sounds good. I would volunteer to go back and call from whatever minutes we have so far and whatever else. If anybody wants to shoot ideas to me, I can make a list of other possible.
Okay.
Just so that it makes it easier to see in one place and, yeah,
Great. So Ryan, you're going to kind of research
exactly.
where we might have holes. And
Yeah.
then on our next conversation, we'll talk about some of our learnings where there might be holes, at which point we'll fill in this line item over here, this TBD on the left that says, what are the holes? So-
Steve brought up a point. So Innie, I just want to point out Alita Ward would be a great person. So Innie, for these conversations, I see it being actually probably 3 or 4 conversations. And so maybe,
I know Alita well. She's a friend.
okay, perfect. So, Evan Schultz, Alita Ward. I really wish I was not blanking. I'm gonna try.
And also, I think the pastor at the First Church
Yes,
congregation.
that's who I was thinking.
Okay.
I'm just blanking on names. It's like,
Okay.
I mean, certainly if you want to do the
Dave-
somebody at Assumption, not Peter Cipriano, at Assumption Church, I just don't know how many churches you want to deal with. So
Sure.
that I think
So
you guys
that's-
can talk about offline.
yeah,
Yeah.
Vanessa and Dave Spaulding. That's who
Vanessa Rose. Vanessa Rose.
Yep, Vanessa and Dave Spaulding. Thank you.
Yes.
Yep,
Dave, what's his last name?
Spaulding,
Spaulding.
SP. Yep, sorry.
SP what?
SPOLETT.
Perfect. Thank you, Kathy. All
That was
right.
Katrina.
And Patrina was talking and Kathy was
Oh, I know,
typing.
Kathy, I'm sorry, Patrina. Kathy typed it in.
Oh,
While we were
okay.
trying to figure out how to spell it,
And,
Kathy just
and
typed it
again,
in the
if
chat.
any of you have strong relationships with the people that we're talking about here, it doesn't by any means like, Karen, or I'll say here, like if someone has a good relationship with Alita, you said you do. If someone has a good relationship with Vanessa and they want to call her, like, let's work with each other and reach out and say, oh, hey, I'm really tight with so-and-so, like Tamisha did. Just because one person's assigned here, let's all help each other. Like I can talk to Steve Scheinberg from the DTC and be neutral, but Tamisha's willing to talk. So just because your name is here doesn't mean you have to do all of the heavy lifting. It just means that you have to ultimately be accountable to reporting back in. So we have our work cut out for us on this. I think
I'm sorry, Nancy, could I add one more?
Yeah.
Sorry. So I know this may be a little bit of a tricky one to do, but I don't know if there's a Chamber of Commerce that would be worth talking to. I don't know if we get that much
Yep,
information.
Beverly, and that's something for Sonia. I think that's a great call, Chamber of Commerce. And it's kind of tied into the economic development.
Right.
Um,
They're definitely going to be, we want to build the relationship for them to be a part of the blueprint.
Yeah, agree. And again, like some of this will inform, maybe it's like the next level, because I'm thinking like the Clebands would be a really good partner to get out a survey, help us get out a survey. But you know, do we need to talk to them at this phase? I think the higher level, thematically, that we keep this, and I think the Chamber of Commerce is a great suggestion. So any other specific questions that we need to spend time now? Otherwise, if you have specific questions about the phone calls.
I want to go back to just your point, Nancy, if you wouldn't mind,
Yeah.
about the 4 weeks being tight and it may be having to be 6 weeks. Again, so I have this kind of starting tomorrow, because now everybody's starting to feel like
I'm rephrasing,
calls.
I'm withdrawing.
You're with
because a month to make these phone calls should be plenty of time. And if it's not, we're not doing what we need to be doing.
Right. Okay. I just wanted to circle back to that because I'm like, I think we can do this. Okay.
Yeah. No, we, in fact, not that we think we can, we have to.
Exactly. We have
to. In part because for our own selves, we have to keep our own feet to the fire. We have to make sure that we are, you know, I mean, it is a marathon, not a sprint, but it's not it's not a huge, long. So I'm withdrawing.
Yeah. Okay. So, and then just so everybody knows and starts to feel comfortable, I am going to kind of tweak the guide that I drafted with a few of these other little things that we just talked about tonight, including the who else can we talk to, just so you can see it. And I will email that around to everybody so that you have it, print out as many templates or type online or whatever you want to do for taking your notes. I don't know that there's anything else needed to get started other than the confirmation about the legalities of recording. So, and
this is, I think it's good for transparency, since these are public meetings. I actually would love to put this online, and Ryan has generously offered to kind of post these things. And Ryan, I want to have an offline conversation with you because I haven't checked in on that front. But that way, this information will live on the website.
Right.
In fact, I think it's better to look there rather than email people, but in terms of the way we're supposed to function. So I would encourage everybody to look on the website, take your own notes here of what you need to do, but you are, you know, officially, this is your charge. Start tomorrow, you know.
Well, but we just need that confirmation about the recording. We need,
Yeah.
you know, we need to find out legally, does everybody have to record their conversations?
Connecticut's a one-party consent, meaning one party has to know they're being recorded. You can't record two people without them
Exactly. It's not a town, and that's what I was saying. I think as long as you ask the person and let them know.
Right, but what I'm saying is, do we have to?
No.
Can we have, right, because that was what we talked about in the beginning, and I don't want anyone starting these if, Nancy, you're going to come back and say we needed to record them and we didn't. Like what?
No, I think, I mean, what's the group? Let's take a sense of the body here, like just in the chat room. Like, do you all feel we should record them or not record them?
Not record them.
I'm sorry, what was the answer? What did you say? So not record. Yeah, type, if you could chat, let's chat. Yeah, I think it seems like the consensus. I say not. I see Jason. Not chat. Yep. Okay. Not record.
Great.
I just think it adds a layer for all of us that
100%.
we don't need at this point. We don't need to get involved in.
Yep.
So,
Are these people ready for our calls once?
no. So that's what I was just going to say. You identify yourself as a member of the task force or
collaborating with the task force.
Equity and Justice in town, and that you have some questions. Would you be willing to spend 20 minutes? And literally to a person, everybody's going to say yes. I mean, I would be very surprised if you run up against anything. Call me or Gina, text us. But that's part of the kind of owning your piece in this is, you know, lean in and introduce yourself. And I am going to put on the agenda for next time. In 2 weeks, our next date is December 3rd. I am going to be putting reporting in of our phone calls, or whatever you call it here. You call it the deep listening interviews.
Yep.
So that will be on our agenda for next time, is an update. So in 2 weeks, you won't expect, you know, our deadline is so if we have to craft the questions, I'm going to say that, but the December 3rd meeting will have a check-in. December 15th, it will be the final findings. So that by whatever our meeting is 2 weeks later, we'll be able to, so we're gonna have to move the date a little bit of the 21st.
Yeah.
Based on our meeting schedule, because I imagine it's gonna be December 15th and then just after the new year. But we'll just be tighter on the other end. We'll make up the difference a little bit down the line.
Yep. Yep.
So again, I'm just trying to keep these meetings tight, and we still have one more agenda item. Are there any outstanding questions? All right, so since this is here, consider an act. Someone could make the motion to move to action items as listed. I mean, however you want to craft the motion, but just to adopt these action steps, and so that we have a plan to move forward.
Well, I will make an action. Nope. I will.
Yes, girl, you will.
I will make a motion that we act upon the action items as discussed when reviewing the research brief.
Yep. Is there a second?
I second it.
Any seconds? Karen makes the motion, and any second. All in favor, show just by saying aye.
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 I need a roll call vote. Tamisha, Jason,
Aye. Oh,
Tamisha, Steve,
aye.
Tamisha.
She typed aye into the chat.
Aye.
Okay, oh, good. Thank you.
Sorry.
Sorry.
It's
Sorry.
okay.
Any?
Aye.
Okay, I'm an aye. Am I missing anybody for Karen? Aye, you made the motion.
Yep.
Anybody else that I'm missing?
Jason, aye.
Okay.
And Doug, aye.
Any, all right, any abstentions? Any, we were supposed to have comment, but I think we've commented, but any no's? Okay, the motion carries unanimously. Great. Okay, I love an action plan.
And
So
I'll get that. I'll get the presentation tweaked in a, with, making it look a little neater than that page currently looks. So I'll get that out now as well.
and then if you could get that to Ryan, who will then put it up on the website and adopt it into the notes, who will then get it to Alex, who will turn it into the town clerk.
All right. And did you say no, don't email it to everybody, just send it to Ryan and everybody will be on their own going to the website?
You have to, because it's like, we can't all, it's a meeting, and so.
Could it be, Nancy, could it be attached to the minutes
Yes,
as an
Good.
attachment? I think
Yeah.
that's a good way to do it, because
perfect. Yep,
I don't want to, I think it's easier than
yep,
trying to
absolute-
rehash all of this, and I'm just going to say, see attached.
yep, perfect. Yep, perfect.
All right. And I'm going to follow up with the people that I have question marks next to.
Perfect. So if you could get that to Ryan when she attaches it, so
Yep.
she can attach it.
Yep.
Yeah, I also, Tamisha, I will join you on the DTC meeting shortly. To consider other advocacy groups. Ryan, that was the broader topic. I don't know, I had different language, but I turn to you.
Okay, just a quick report on this. During that June meeting, something called the Community Conversations on Diversity came up. And I went and spoke to Kristen McCarthy Fahey, and then she also directed me to Trudy Durrell. So I talked to both of them about the history of this, which was interesting, and kind of turns out it was farther back in history than I would have thought. They took place 2010, 2011. It was an initiative that grew out of Board of Ed strategic planning process, where there was a subcommittee on cultural diversity. They did a survey around 2008, and there were a lot of kind of appalling answers to some of the questions in that area. And at the time, Sacred Heart, a few years later, Sacred Heart was involved in an initiative called Community Conversations. They came to Fairfield and asked if it was a grant program. They asked if there was any particular thing. There were certain topics that they could come in and have conversations. And Fairfield Board of Ed chose to address the issue of diversity through these conversations. So they formed a steering committee, and it was some people that had been on the subcommittee and others from the community. They were trained through the grant to conduct these conversations. And they did. They went out and had about 10 different over dinner or over wine and cheese kind of conversations. And you know, it was interesting, but it went nowhere. But both of them kind of agreed that it was a fizzled effort, and that because there were no action steps to follow it up, it ended up not having the energy, you know, to carry into other areas. From both of them, that was a recommendation. Just if you're, you know, whatever you're doing, get some action steps behind it. Listening is great, but make sure there's some tangible things that come out of it that you have to to go forth with. Other comments were, make sure that you're looking at the role of housing, of affordable housing, looking to youth for insights, and that was about it. So it was kind of interesting how it grew out of actually a survey, and then to have the larger conversations, but without tooth, so that's it. Now we know if somebody references that when you're talking to them, and that was one of the things I was concerned about. It's like, let's just educate ourselves so that when we're having conversations and somebody says, oh, I remember these diversity, whatever happened, that you can say, yeah, we're aware of that. We've discussed it or whatever, but.
Thank you, Ryan. That's good intel. And I also spoke to the select woman of the Democrat select woman in Westport to find out about their programs and historically what had been done. And just by the fact that we've codified this, her main takeaway for me was just make sure you get it codified, that it's a government sanctioned, which is something, interestingly, we were sort of, when Gina and I first talked, we were kind of wary about going through the government process. And her feeling was that it was great that this has been codified, that all of these discussions are in the purview of the watchful eye of the public, and that it is a government sanctioned entity. We're actually, at least where we are trying to go, is we're in good shape, compared to what at least in terms of our ability to make long-lasting, impactful change. So that was an initial conversation with, as I said, the select woman. I haven't connected with the person that's kind of running it, but really her main takeaway was make sure that you're doing this with public support and awareness, and that you're not only having the conversations and kind of doing exactly what we're mapping out. So I feel really encouraged by my conversation. So that had come up on the last call to talk about Westport. So I wanted to circle back there. Anyone have any other kind of miscellaneous update on various groups' findings? This is one long continued conversation. So just know that each time we will, Am I breaking up?
No, you're fine. Oh, now you're gone.
Is my audio bad?
Fine.
You're fine.
Okay, so just know for the future that we will always seek comment from the task force, from the public, and then kind of an update on what other groups are doing. So if you all of a sudden go, I forgot this, there's next time. So if you could email me your dates, preferred, I mean, I think we're gonna move forward. Actually, I should reframe. We're gonna move forward with this kind of Monday, Thursday structure into the new year. So I'm gonna make a recommendation. And then if you guys have any changes, that'll be on the agenda for next time. Any questions? Concerns, comments?
I have a question.
Okay, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Oh, sorry.
Yes, Kathy.
Sorry. I went back and listened to
Yeah.
the original, that that meeting, the big meeting with all of the town officials and everything. Okay, so one of the things that happened, I noticed, was there was a laundry list of questions that were asked that were specific to the police chief. Are those questions going to be answered somewhere along the way, or are we just relying on that person having emailed the police chief to answer? Because
No, so those exist, and Ryan, where
Okay.
is that a dangling?
I have them, and I just was not clear on whether you wanted them posted on, as well on the website.
So why don't you forward that to Steve? Since he's gonna be talking to the police chief, and say, so Steve can reference them. Steve, it might be worth you and me just jumping on the call quick so I can give you some context.
That's fine.
But Kathy, thank you for bringing that up.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I have a question just real quick, and I think we need to clear it up on our website because we have to put what our mission is. But are we supposed to be answering those questions, or are we just supposed to be gathering that information and passing it on to the permanent task force? Or, I just want to be clear on what our charge is, because if we're setting ourselves up to be the place where they're going to go get all these answers, as I look at our mission, our charge, it doesn't seem to be that's what it is. So I want to be clear on that. That's all.
Well, I think that becomes part of our, it's
You're breaking up now. You guys can't hear her, right?
No, I just lost her too.
internet issues.
You follow what I'm asking though, right? I mean, I don't know if we're setting ourselves up to answer all these questions.
I'm trying to get to a spot in my house. I think okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's open-ended. I think it has to become part of our blueprint, how to answer that question. Can you still hear me?
Yep.
With that, Steve, I'm not ignoring you. I'm just totally breaking up. Do I have a motion to? So Steve, did you hear my answer?
No, you need to repeat it.
That this becomes part of our blueprint is answering that question. Figuring out what that role is. Does that make sense?
Well, I think we need to figure it out like in the beginning, not at the end.
Yeah, but that's part of the blueprint. That's what we can incorporate we can talk that, we can inform that, is my point, through our work.
Okay, but I think Ryan's point that, there's all these questions out there that came from that, or Kathy's, that came from that meeting. Are we supposed to answer those questions?
Oh, those questions. Oh, yes. Yeah. No. They've been answered. Some of them have been answered. We have some of those answers. That's what I'm saying. That's why I want to talk.
Whether or not they've been answered, are we supposed to be the ones that are supposed to answer them going forward? Put it that way. Or are we just supposed to gather?
Meaning, do we have a format for then sharing the information we find with the public? Is that what you're asking?
or are they gonna be saying, like, if I go to a meeting at one of these groups and they come with 20 different questions, and am I supposed to have 20 answers, or are we supposed to say, this is gonna be and these questions are great moving forward for the permanent task force kind of thing?
Yeah, but I think that that's part of the homework that we have to figure out. I mean, that forum, those questions were asked when this didn't exist.
Right.
Do we what do we feel is our responsibility as a task force? I mean, I think my feeling would be, let's have these conversations and look at the information and then figure out what we want to do with it. Whether it's put it in a survey, have a platform for getting it out in these, the greater public piece of this is going to be one of the steps down the line when we have these moderated discussions. Those are going to be public opportunities to have those questions asked and answered. Does that make sense?
If that's what we're charged with, yeah. I mean, I just want to be clear on it, because we're going to get inundated with questions by the public if we're the place they're supposed to go to get answers. If we're
what
the
we
task
are
force,
is
yeah.
I see it more as a conduit for having
Right.
being a platform to have the discussions. For instance, that was a big question. The day from the community forum, it was like people asked questions and then they went into the ether. And so I think that when we are informing
Exactly.
right, so I think that will be up for us to decide as a group. We've now lost basically quorum, so we do have to adjourn. So Steve, I'm not ignoring you. I just think it's going to be informed as we go. Steve made the motion to adjourn. Do I have a second?
A second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, aye. Okay. Thanks all.
Night, everybody.
Thanks, Ellen.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.